the driver's license being suspended or revoked due to an administrative action by courts, states, for being behind on child support. There was a case about that, Thompson and something in 1923. I know that you're familiar with it. Do you know which one it was, or if that was the proper year?
I don't know if it's the proper year. I know it was in the 1920s. It was Thompson versus somebody. He was going against either the sheriff or the police chief. It was
I looked it up for like 30 minutes last night and couldn't find it.
What couldn't you find?
Oh, I couldn't find that case. I used all kind of different keywords, and I still couldn't find it and read the case law on that.
It's Thompson versus Smith, and it was in Virginia. It was actually 1930.
Thompson versus Smith?
Yes, I put the case text, a case text link up in the chat there. So, and then right below it, I put Thompson versus Smith, 1930.
I'll be looking that up later. All right, thank you.
So, do you know what that case was about?
Just like the surface of it, it was about licenses not being able to be suspended due to administrative purposes. About all I got on that.
Yeah, I mean that's basically. It's really interesting because all of the sovereign citizens typically will take quotes from this case law saying that this is the law that undeniably tells you that you don't have to have a license, a driver's license in the state. It doesn't have the authority to give you a driver's license. And really what the law says is that you're licensed to move around, your license to move, or your right to move your persons around and travel freely on the highway without being molested is a sacred right, and it carries over with the licensing. And that's actually one of the reasons that they use to say for the state to take away your driver's license, they have to actually have something in law. They can't do it over administrative processes. You actually have to endanger the public, reckless driving, reckless endangerment, something of that sort, something of that nature. And the parts that sovereign citizens love to use, they're good parts. I mean, they're good sayings and good quotations, but it's not the actual law of the case.
Okay.
So another thing that people really should understand is that when you're reading Supreme Court case law or really just administrative case law, whenever they're talking about statutes and judging statutes, it's always an administrative legal society case law ruling. It's not necessarily common law. Another thing that they talked about in this case, which I thought was really, really interesting, is Thompson brought the action in under equity. And this was before, this was still when everybody in the legal society and most people in general society, if they knew anything about the law, knew a big difference between equity and actual law. And so Smith argued that it wasn't equity, that it was just an action in law. And the Supreme Court said, no, your rights are property. And so that's equitable.
Come on. Yep. Rights are property for sure. Yep. Because we're able to outsource them, consent them away. It has to do with our liberty and our time. It's a resource of ours. So it is property.
Unless it's liberty or you sent it over. Liberty is granted to you. So it is your freedom.
And who grants you liberty?
The one that grants you that liberty is the one that you allow to be your God if you want to worship at their temple and play in their game. So it's the state if so allowed.
So liberty comes through privilege.
Right.
Well, liberty literally comes from the Roman god Libertas, and this is why like Jewish people wear the cap on their head. If you go to monks and monasteries, they have the cap on the back of their head.
Dang.
So that's actually a sign, because when the slaves were granted liberty from the god Libertas through a magistrate of the state, one of the ways that they would show that they were free is they would shave the back part of their head and it would be bald. So, for early Christians and Jews, that would be the way to show that they come under God's rule. They come under God's law, not the state's law. So, and kind of getting back to that, whenever they're doing case law, administrating statutes, that's exactly basically what they're saying is the slaves come under the state's law. These aren't administrating free man, free woman. It's administrating the slaves that don't know any better.
I just, generally speaking, think of any word that triggers an alarm bell in my veteran person's code book there. So if I hear anything that takes me back to the days, then I know, that ain't good. Back to when I had to live under what they call the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Kind of funny that when you're in the military, you can cite and bring up and quote codes left and right, and every word that's in it verbatim.
Life.
Yeah, but yet you don't even know what it says in the Constitution you're supposedly protecting. Or you couldn't cite a single traffic statute. So I don't know. It's just funny. It's a military member or even a veteran probably could clearly cite the Uniform Code of Military Justice or any of the codes that you fall under while under their jurisdiction. Yet they get out and they don't even know what true law is in their home, and neither do the people. That's why JC and I exist. We're here to teach y'all fine folk.
Yeah, but it's not just us. Everybody's here to teach each other.
That's correct.
It's like the people who gather here on this show have an understanding on one level. Most people in society don't have that understanding. So everybody's to go and connect with the people that have the closest understanding to themselves in their personal lives and try and pass this message forward, because that is how common law works. That's how natural law works. It's just natural. It naturally happens.
I like being in the natural.
Come on, put some pants on, dude.
If anybody has a question or wishes to join in the conversation, just raise your hand. I believe it's star 2 if you're on the phone. And it's just putting the hand up on the computer.
I see Alice is in the house.
Alice, what's going on, man? No, actually you had it right the first time. That's basically the whole point and reason of government. That's the reason for courts is to enforce private contracts. When somebody violates or breaks a contract, or does not execute a contract properly, then you take them to court and get some type of court order or a judgment depending on the specific performance. So you would take them to court for breach of a contract, and then the government will impose some type of remedy one way or another. Typically, contracts are executed between two persons that own property. So if you don't get the execution of their free will, then you would go to seek some type of judgment. And then once you get the judgment, you would write out the proper paperwork to go and seize the property to make up for whatever payment or whatever financial loss that you incurred or suffered through the non-performance of that contract. And the sheriff would take the property, sell it at auction, and then give the remaining balance of the remaining money after paying you off to whoever didn't execute their side of the contract.
But that's only like person versus person. What if the man versus man? Is it still applicable?
What's that, man?
What you just described works if it's a person versus a person? What if it's a man versus a man? Will it still work?
Yeah, a man versus a man, that's just that common law. So, like, one of the definitions for common law is a controversy between man against man against woman, woman against man, however you wish to kind of divide it up. And an action at common law, there are no attorneys. You don't have representatives. Back in the day, it would basically be a trial of novices, so two persons without legal training, and a man has many persons. So, but a person only has one man or one woman, unless it's an incorporated persons, and that's a body politic. And again, like, the government is there for the enforcement of the contracts, enforcement of the private contracts that are agreed upon between two individuals. And they're also there for the protection of property, like private property.
I mean, if their job was just to enforce the existing contracts, why do we have over 80 or 90 million, statutes, regulations, policies, ordinances, you name it?
Well, the reason for that is because, for the most part, people are uneducated. So in the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution, it says slavery and involuntary servitude, are basically abolished in all of the territories and the states of the United States. What it doesn't say is that voluntary servitude or voluntary slavery is abolished, because, of course, everybody has the right to unlimited contract. And the state's not going to exactly tell you and inform you how you're contracting in with their different agencies and departments of government. And the biggest way that people do this without any knowledge is that it's kind of like the Citizens United case. A lot of people are upset about that from both sides, and it's because the slaves don't actually understand what's going on. Whenever somebody's born, they get the birth certificate. The birth certificate turns into a social security number application. Well, social security application turns into a social security number. And that social security number takes the actual man, the woman, man or woman in training, and turns them into an incorporated body. And that incorporated body has all of the duties, privileges, and immunities as any other corporation. They just aren't as well financed or backed. So that's basically how they take away everybody's rights and give them duties and privileges, and they don't have any rights. And that's why corporations commit heinous and atrocious crimes against society. And in law, it works out, is because they couldn't commit those things against man or woman, but when man or woman is in the capacity of a corporation, now they're on the same playing field of a dead civil law court. So, and of course, Alice, this is how everything's supposed to work. It's not how it actually does work anymore. One of the big reasons is because over generations, a lot of this information, a lot of this knowledge has been lost, just kind of forgotten or buried by people who actually know.
Kind of like most people my age anyway, were probably raised either being told constantly, you got to work to get your driver's license, or if you're in a lower income type bracket as I was, it was more like, you go begging your parents, can I get a driver's license, because I want to drive. And so we're at a point where we're bred into a compliance so deep that we're begging for their permission to do things.
Yeah.
Oracle has her hands up. Oracle?
Yeah.
You have something to
Hi,
add?
everybody. I'll be able
Hi.
to talk as long as there's some reception. I'm driving, so we'll see if I don't lose a call. But you were mentioning, JC, about common law, and at what point would you say that it was lost? At what point was the transition that got people out of common law and into, what else? So how did we lose that? I mean, what happened? What was the catalyst about that?
Well, there were several kind of major catalysts, because they had to, take away the law. pieces at a time over generations. So the biggest catalyst would have been right after the Civil War. And right after the Civil War, every single state and all of the states after that, whenever they joined, they basically abolished all courts of law and equity and replaced them with state courts and the civil form of a complaint. So at that point, there was no actual law process. Now, they couldn't just get rid of law because the people would have been up in arms. And the main reason that they did this was more or less to keep all of the, I mean, this is how they sold it to the public, was to keep all of the newly freed slaves basically in slavery, in a voluntary indentured servitude. That's why they created the 14th Amendment. After that, the next really, really big step would have been in 1933 or 37 with the Social Security Administration Act. And that's when they started handing out Social Security numbers to persons and turning man and woman into a corporation. So those are two of the really, really big kind of key factors right there. And then, of course, after that, they just kept on. And one of the big things that they started doing was law schools actually got out of the practice of teaching law and into the practice of teaching administration. And now basically all law schools teach is administration.
Well, that's part of the reason why it's incredibly difficult to speak to, an attorney about common law. It's very foreign to them, and it's in opposition to what they've learned when they've gone into law school. And
yeah, and I mean there are some
101.
attorneys. There are some attorneys that are a lot more suited to it than others. Attorneys that practice mainly in the realm of personal actions against individuals and individuals. In some ways, kind of family attorneys are actually fairly well suited. But for sure, probate attorneys, like I actually tell people pretty often that probate court is actually a really good court to kind of learn a lot about common law, because probate court is all day long. You have heirs to a family, so everybody has a claim.
Right.
Two parties are bringing a claim. Those claims are opposing each other, and it has to more or less follow the common law as to who has the right to what property. Another really, really good place to see common law, and this is where, as soon as somebody gets past the kind of attorney stage and they get into the more politically charged judicial phase of their career, if they start out as a magistrates in small claim courts and magistrates in the lower courts basically have to know the basics of common law, especially in small claims courts, because in a lot of small claim court cases, you have one individual and another individual. They don't have attorneys because, for an attorney to take a case, it's going to be at least $5,000. Most small claims courts don't go above $10,000. And if you got to take that case to trial, you're looking at another $10,000. So there's not really a whole lot of point in getting an attorney. So
I think in California, if I'm not mistaken, I don't even think you're allowed to have an attorney in small claims.
Oh.
And here there's 3 different brackets, and I believe small claims is up to 10,000 maybe.
Yeah, I would say most states that I've seen, small claims is either 7,500 or 10,000. I think I've seen a couple of states where it goes up to 12.
Yeah, and just some context on that gradual process of degrading rights and things. I looked it up, and 1903 is when Massachusetts and Missouri started using driver's license. Those are the first. And then 1946 is when birth certificates became the national standard for all that good, juicy stuff.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that Massachusetts, because they've always been kind of on the forefront of licensing and things of that nature. I'm pretty sure by the mid to late 30s, they had, that the car had to be registered and you also had to have insurance on it. I know that they were the first state to do those things.
Wow.
Yeah. In fact, I think if I'm not mistaken, which I might be, Massachusetts had a law back in the early days where a household would be fined for every firearm that they did not have. So for every able-bodied male, there was supposed to be a firearm, and it was like $9 a year or something.
Wow.
But that's they were probably on the forefront of licensing for not having a weapon. But I mean, back then, you think about it, that's like living in a home with no stove or microwave. It'd be like, how do you eat? And no Burger Kings.
Well, yeah, I don't know if they have real food anyways.
Yeah.
I do know that the history of driver's license licensing and car registration in California was, like they had the registration because the state registered all of its own vehicles. The state also imposed insurance on all of its own vehicles just in case one of their employees, hit somebody, got into an accident, something of that nature. And of course, the driver's license started because they wished to license people who were driving state-owned vehicles, make sure they knew how to drive before giving them the keys and a 2-ton bullet and putting them out on the road at 60 miles an hour.
Yeah. In fact, in my experience, if you work with government personnel, if they are employees of the federal government, or I don't even know about state, I just know federal. But if you're a contractor or private, you can't even ride in the same vehicle with them, which is kind of funny.
That's the worst joke you ever told.
I agree.
What was the joke? I missed it.
Yeah, when I used to work as a contractor, and we weren't supposed to ride in vehicles with the government, the federal employees, in my case, Department of the Navy. Yeah, we couldn't even ride in the same vehicles or.
Yeah, they said you got to take your Blackwater vehicle, man.
Yeah, ours were better anyway.
Right?
Yes, sir.
They're like, you got that contractor money, boy.
And I said, I'm going to have to charge you for this conversation. Yeah, government jobs were always good for security and longevity because the government never gets smaller in size. So as long as you don't, run into somebody in your government vehicle, you're pretty safe. But contractor jobs, they change all the time.
There was a time when the government got smaller in size.
Civil War?
No, actually, that's the time where it greatly expanded. I was actually talking about the War of 1812. So, yeah, in fact, all conflicts before the Civil War, the government had to disband the militia. It wasn't exactly an army or a unified army, but they had to disband the militia after the conflict.
Yeah. Could you imagine such a time?
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine in a dream. But that was the whole idea. It's like the whole idea of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence was that the federal government wouldn't ever have a standing army. That's why in the Constitution it says that Congress has to, approve the budget, approve the finances for the army. They can't put it out more than 2 years. So I talk about that in my How the Constitution Reads videos.
I know. You think I haven't watched that video? I've watched that video. No, I'm just kidding. Question in the chat from Tiger Bear. What are your thoughts about military members who are likely to be set free from slavery because of rejection of the V based on faith?